Yeah, okay. Let me activate the timer. Well, it is a great pleasure to be here. I was standing at the bottom during the morning, and I feel more comfortable now that to deliver some reflection on a rather specific issue, which is the rural-urban divide, which is one of the most striking divide, which is coming up with increasing territorial inequalities around the old Western world and the role that EU cohesion policy can play in them. I'll go straight into the facts, and you'll see that some of the things that I'll be arguing, you will resound some of the punchlines on this morning conference. First, the fact, economic territorial inequalities had gone down after the war for a very long time, and in some countries more, some countries less, but they've gone up. They've gone up for 30 years, unequivocally so. And there are some numbers. I will not quote them. It's a fact. But what is interesting, and we should take into account, and it was clear from this morning's session, is that it is not just a matter of territorial inequalities, but also social inequalities. Let's define them clearly as the access and quality of people to fundamental services, education, mobility, health. The gaps have increased, okay? Some people are much better off than they were 30 years ago. Some are worse, and some haven't improved at all. And there is also a third category, which is easier to explain in this part of the world. It is a German concept. The Mediterranean and Anglo-Saxon is less used to it, which is recognition inequalities. Many people might not be worse off in economic terms, might not be worse off in terms of access to services, but they feel that their values, their norms, their identity is not, has been disregarded, okay? Has been not taken into account significantly. They are off the center of the stage. They feel that authorities, elites are not taking them into account. They feel abandoned, as my friend Andres Rodriguez Poses say. So these have opened divides, which are not between countries, but within countries. It was mentioned this morning. Let's remember that we're in a world where territorial inequalities all over the world have decreased, not increased, but they're increasing within countries, okay? They're creating divides. Divides between rural areas or inner areas, as we call them in Italy, I'll come back to that, and urban areas. They're occurring within an urban area, between center and peripheries, and they're happening between towns that are succeeding and others which are not. I should point in that direction, yes? This is particularly relevant in rural areas. The rural-urban divide is particularly striking all over the places. That has to do with my friend Kevin Morgan from Wales called metrophilia. There has been a bit of metrophilia in the last 30 years. Okay, of course, we know from Marshall that urban areas are very important, that's very important for innovation. People concentrate in urban areas, but we have not taken enough into account that enormous negative externalities were being produced in urban areas, and that this movement of people from rural areas to urban areas was depriving all of us from the potential of rural areas. And it was also causing social unrest, and it was causing anger. And this anger is turning into a voice, is turning into a reaction. Exit from rural areas, people abandoning. We were told at one point in the last 20 years it was enough. So people move to urban areas so they get richer, so eventually inequalities will equalize. Well, that has not occurred, and people exiting has not always produced people improving their conditions. And most of all, young people have moved from rural areas, depriving rural areas from their capacity to grow, even from being attended, creating problems from climate change, creating problems from effects of natural disasters. So people have become angry, and I borrow from the American psychologist Karen Sennert the expression authoritarian dynamic. This has produced that kind of reaction that your minister of Finance has mentioned in the first 5 words of her presentation this morning a sort of intolerance for diversity, a lack of trust. She mentioned trust in institutions and elites, and a demand for close community for barriers, something which goes a lot against Europe, that is worrying a lot of us because Europe has already gone through this phase some decades ago with terrible disasters. The elites are awakening. Read The Economist. I will not read it for you. I mean, the leading articles say we should take into account territorial inequalities, otherwise the fury of voters will increase. So there is awareness that something should be done. And then in order to do something about, everybody is speaking about suddenly place. You read suddenly place-based politics everywhere. And if you read the papers, if you read the messages, often, quite honestly and frankly, you see that there is nothing much new. So let's, for a second, stop on a conceptual framework. The second part, I will tell you, hey, we are doing it. Many regions, even my country, with all its troubles, is doing something about it. So what I'm telling you is not just theory, but is also practice and facts which are taking place within cohesion policy. And this is giving, which will be my last punchline, some advice on cohesion policy now, on the negotiation in the next few months. But in order to do so, we need to address the question of why. Why have territorial inequalities increased? Why has the urban-rural divide increased? And my claim, I will not go in detail, there are papers behind it, is that it is not an unavoidable fact due to globalization, to technologies, to climate change. We have contributed to it by doing wrong policies. But that's good news, if I'm right, because if it's due to wrong policy, we can do something about it. And there were 3 policies that have somehow produced it. One, it was mentioned again this morning implicitly by your minister, and it was one-size-fits-all structural reforms. Of course we know that institutional reforms are fundamental, but we have thought for a long time that there would be something like called a best practice. Okay, so we invent what should be done, and it will be done everywhere, every region, rural, urban, periphery centers. And this has produced very bad results because the impact of a change of an institution on different places is different. Context matters. There was a second policy that we followed that has to do with metrophilia. At one point, we realized that public administrations don't know exactly what to do. Too much complexity, too much knowledge to be handled. A public administration don't know how to choose. Should we do infrastructure there? Should we move in that direction? Industrial policy? What to do? What shall incentive to small firms? Yes, but how? So the reaction to this kind of uncertainty and to this complexity was, oh, we know we have the large corporation, we have private corporations. Now, take me carefully on this point. Of course, corporations are an extraordinary machine to solve problems because they deal with complexity in order to maximize profits. This is the engine of capitalism. But they don't do it for the public benefits. They've never done it. Quite rightly so. They do it for their shareholders, most of all. But as the economists now recognize, we have made many investments following, not directing, the choice of corporations. We have created infrastructure, produced a sewage system, and do laws where the corporation were moving, okay? And that has produced problems because that has deprived rural areas from our attention. And finally, that's very important, it was mentioned today, we realized that these 2 policies were producing better results, so we said, okay, there are lots of people which are angry, that are falling behind, there is an increased inequality, what shall we do? We're throwing money at them. Subsidies, subsidizing them. Compassionate compensation. We compensate for the mistakes by doing a third mistake. Enabling and giving local authorities the money, spend it the way you want, create labor, give it to pretending that we wrote beautiful slogans on the top of it. We call it in words, which were but at the end of the game, it was money to everybody to just carry on. And we did worse than, when we did that, we did the worst of all, because we create an incentive for local authorities, which are the bulk of our democracies, diversified democracies, but we created an incentive for them to become rentier. They became the intermediaries from our money from the center or from Brussels and the people. So we basically, let's be frank, we exchanged from the centers, we gave them money, and in exchange we had the votes of the people that they were producing labor for, and that was short-termism. I've taken a long time to describe the causes because, as always, when you know, if you believe what the cause is, then you know what to do. And cohesion policy sometimes has fallen prey of these mistakes, particularly the third mistake, in my country, in Italy, certainly in the south of Italy for a long time. And we have increased inequality by creating an incentive not to innovate, pretending that we were innovating. Well, you know that with lots of other people, including you, we designed a reform of cohesion policy in 2013, 2008, 2013. It is my claim, in which I will not try to argue here, I have a paper on that, that reform was more or less the appropriate reform. It was moving in the right direction. I completely agree with your minister that we do not need to fiddle too much with regulation. The scheme, the framework is there. My claim is that we have not believed enough in the reform we made. We haven't given to it enough political strength, and we have not invested in a major change of human resources that difficult policy required. What is this policy? Here is in a picture what I call the place-based approach. The place-based approach is based on two words, which you find in the slide before, which are knowledge and power. When you have an area, a rural area, which is falling behind, which is not moving ahead, you need to trigger two things. You need to deal with knowledge, to know how to move out of it. Who has the knowledge to move out of a place? Who knows which are the novelties, the innovation? I mean, most of the knowledge necessary for a place which is an underdevelopment trap, to move out of a trap, is in the place, is in the people. The professional people, the workers, the entrepreneurs, the people producing, the teachers, the people producing health and the people receiving health. Okay? So they have much of the knowledge in our current democracies. But they also need external knowledge. They need to interact with the great competence centers, with the corporations. Not leaving to the corporation the power to decide what to do, but making sure that the corporations are in the game, that the big universities are in the game. So knowledge in the place and outside. And then you need power. Again, even if I don't see your eyes because of the light, but let's look at each other's eyes. The local authorities, the mayors of our amazing Europe, are the bulk, are the turning point of any solution, because they're closer to us at the moment where citizens are sort of losing trust. But at the same time, we cannot leave them alone. We cannot leave them alone because they are too close to the citizens and they might be tempted, particularly if you have endowed them with lots of transfers, they might be tempted not to innovate. Acemoglu, fantastic American economist, is telling us why. Why does a public authority of a local place might be tempted not to innovate, or to pretend to innovate, which is the same? For a very simple reason. Because he knows that by creating innovation, the innovators might displace the authority, might create a change, and you be yourself put at risk. It's normal. This is the political economy of cohesion policy. We cannot do policies without understanding the political economy. What is the incentive for the authorities that we enable with the money to do the job that we would like them to do? If we don't answer this question, we make mistakes. So, and this is the turning point, the local authorities are part of the solution. Without them, we go nowhere. But they're also part of the problem. And here is the beauty of the place-based approach, where the national government, or in big states, the regional governments, and the European Union play what Adam Smith called the role of a fair and impartial spectator. A national authority is far away enough, and Brussels is even more farther away enough to have an interest that everything grows. I mean, Europe will fall apart if harmonious development treaty is not satisfied. So it is in the interest of Europe, than any other authority, to make sure that territorial inequalities go down, and that we do not just transfer money for short-term results. So what is cohesion policy all about? It's about not just transferring money, by interfering, as Amartya Sen saying, being paternalistic, not enabling local authorities with resources and letting them to do what they want, but interfering, making sure that the methodology through which they use is appropriate. And this is a place-based approach. What you need to do, you need to make sure that in every place-based, place could be an alliance of communities in a rural area, 15 municipalities, or in a big town, could be a quarter, an area, a subdivision of a big city, okay? You need to make sure that in a place, first of all, there is a heated, informed debate among citizens on what is their vision, what is that is lacking for them to grow. It is up to the entrepreneurs, to the innovators to say why your beautiful ideas don't move ahead. It is a matter of credit, of access to land, of not having the right trained people that you can rely on. What is it? It is regulation that is not preventing you, is that you don't know how to go on the big market. So it is up to the entrepreneurs and it is up to the people being educated, the students, the teachers. It is up to the people going to the health system to say, why? Close your eyes, you are in an inner areas, in a rural area. What is your problem? What happens when you have a small heart attack? Or what happens for a young couple deciding not to move away from a rural area, which is remote, but with amazing potential. They have technological advance, they have studied at university, they are about to have kids. What is their question? What will be the quality of the school where I send my kids? Shall I move to an urban area, though they probably study much better? So there is a demand coming from the people who want to live in rural areas, that demand a quality of services, and they base their capacity to live there, to earn there, to do enterprise there on this response. And that needs to come out in debate. This is participation, but not in false words. Then you need to decide the boundaries of the place. What is an alliance? How big has to be an alliance of municipalities? 2, 7, 8? So you need to through debate, to make sure that a group of municipalities come together that has actually a common vision, that share complementarities in the mobility, in the services, in the development of enterprises, in the development of forestry, in agriculture. And then the delicate point. You enable local authorities, you empower them, but you tell them, hey, you are under guard. I will destabilize you. I am enabling you only insofar as you do create a public debate. You do include all the people and the innovators. You don't close yourself up with the few enterprises with which you've always operated. So the fair and impartial spectator, the European Commission, the national government of Latvia, of Italy, they interact with the local authorities by empowering the authority, but at the same time making sure that the right methodology is implemented, and this methodology includes the use of outcome indicators. This is a true place-based approach. Italy has experienced it. Let's take the last 10 minutes to discuss an experience. You might say, that sounds very theoretical. Well, we tried it. We tried in rural areas. Italy has a large rural area. 27% of my country is rural. 45% of Latvia is rural. And the Italian rural areas have a specific feature, which is diversity, because of the rugosity, because of the roughness of Italian country. Not plateaus, not high plateaus, but a very corrugated, how can you say in English? I'm a statistician. I built an index of roughness, of spikiness, more exactly, an index of spikiness, okay? It's a very spiky country. That means that there is a very high diversity of climate, of nature, of humidity, of culture, of agriculture, of forestry, and then people from all over the world have settled in Italy, in my country, from different parts of the world, from Middle East, from Asia, in the past, and they still speak different languages. Italian, they speak Arbrecht in some of this area, which is Albanian, pre-Muslim Albanian, okay? Or they speak Greekanic, which is older than the currently spoken Greeks. And that's all over, the Occitan people up in the north. So a high diversity. Why I'm stopping on this point? Because this is economics. What does the middle class of the world, both the Western middle class and the Chinese, India, and Indonesian new middle class, talking about 800 million middle class people, what do they demand? More and more. They demand diversity. They don't want standardized products. They demand diversity when they travel. They demand diversity when they eat. They demand diversity when they buy clothes. They demand diversity when you hear a song. So rural areas of all over the world, certainly of Italy, have a fantastic chance in current capitalism. And no surprise, so many young people are coming back to these areas. But that's not enough. They come back and they find troubles. No schools, no good buses, no good conditions, difficult of access to credit, no program for startup. So there are lots of signals of change which do not produce a trend. The trend is a big demographic decline. I noticed that in this conference, the second line is a demographic decline of rural areas. Italy is suffering a major demographic decline of rural areas, 0.5% reduction of population a year in these areas. So we came into the point saying, this is fantastic. This is a classical example of how we can do a place-based approach. Don't believe in policies and politics when they tell you that they can resurrect an area if there is no autonomous, endogenous, entrepreneurial spirits. It doesn't work. But you can do a lot if entrepreneurial spirits, or as John Maynard Keynes used to call them, anima spirits are there. And we have anima spirits. So we decided to draw this map of Italy. This is practical. The greener you are, and we decided to measure it in a different way. We decided to define rural, not as the European Commission does. The European Commission does a fantastic job in doing it. But we added something else, and this something else is very simple. How distant you are from a good supply of services, of school, access to railway, and education and health. The greener you are, the farthest away you are. 60 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 80 minutes. So the greener, the worse you are. So you can see here, if my thing works, that the ultra-remote area of Italy have about a very small share of the population, 700,000. If you add the remote areas, you have about 4.5 million people living quite far away from service. And we say, this is our people. And these people are angry. These people are voting for anti-elites. They did a year ago. 5% more in the center north and north of the country. They express their anger for the governing elites. Okay, so they're angry. What can we do for them? Well, we can do a place-based approach. And what is this? What will this? And look at that, by the way. Look at that. On the right-hand side, you see in color the inner areas, the areas far away from services. The colored one on the left is the plain. Okay, people living near services. The redder you are, that means that there is a demographic decline. Look what the demographic decline is, all concentrated in inner areas. The green areas, with exceptions, is all growing. So this is a manifestation that there is a very strong correlation between demographic decline and where you live. People are moving out of the remote areas. So what kind of policy we decided to do, a place-based approach. And we decided to put 300 million euros, not from cohesion policy, but from the Italian budget. Your minister talked about semester. There has to be a connection between the national policy and the cohesion policy. So Italy put 300 million euros on the improvement, on the permanent improvement of education, mobility, and health in these areas. And the regions accepted to match these by 2-3 times, 700 million euros, of their cohesion policy fund for development, agriculture, manufacturing, culture, and tourism. And we decided that these things would work together in an integrated, the famous word, integrated approach, in which we asked every group of areas. Here I jump so you can see the boundaries. These are the 72 project areas that we slowly chose. 72 project areas, 1,014 municipalities, each project area 29,000 people. They cover 17% of Italy in terms of surface, but only 3% of the population. So we ask each of these areas to develop their own vision of the future, which combine, what about health in 20 years? What about education in 20 years? What schools do we want? What pedagogical system? What kind of specialization? What do the firms of our area need? And then mobility. How do we want to arrange mobility? Not in the 30 years ago, in a modern mobility. Mobility is not about big buses anymore. Mobility is about flexible mobility. We can redesign the mobility. Okay, fine. And then what about access to land? Oh, we have lots of people, but they can't access to land because nobody knows who the lands belong to. The owners of the land are now in Argentina or in Australia, people who emigrated from Italy years ago, and we don't know who they own it. So we have a legal problem of owning the land. So, and we have young people who say, we want more land to do funny things, crazy strawberries, or producing cheese and selling it at $27 in New York. We're talking about making money, and making money by living there. And by living there, you have people, as the British say, coming again, guardian of the land, checking on the forests, on the rivers, making sure that the land is attended. And so we asked each of them to develop a vision. And we did it through this tension, conflict, yes, conflict. Let's be honest, between the national government and regional government on one end and the local authorities. A productive conflict, a discussion, a debate, sometimes harsh, on what to do. Allowing them to choose their own way, but making sure that the methodology through which they did it would be accountable, in line with modern, innovative methodologies, and that the money would be spent appropriately. These are just numbers. I will not cover them because I've got 1 minute, 40 seconds. It's just to show you that I'm a statistician and that Italy sometimes uses number. Everything, now I'm joking because I need to revive you, I spoke a lot. It is just to say that every single project that these people have chosen truly has, as it is written in the regulation, it truly has an outcome indicator, and it truly has a target. So we can truly check whether at the end of the 3 years they have actually produced. Look at that, only that, because I mean, that is too beautiful. Time between very practical things. Why do people stay or move out? Because the time between call and arrival of emergency is too long. This is a map, okay? This is 50 minutes. The green line is the Italian minimum standard. Look where they are, 72 areas. If every dot is an area, okay? 20, 25, 30, 50 minutes. You don't survive a heart attack. You don't want to live in a place where you have 50 minutes before anything arrives, okay? So the target is very clear. From 40 to 30, from 30 to 25. Okay, that is what we did. So what does he say in the last minute for EU cohesion policy? What does he say to us? What I hope my government and your government can cooperate in obtaining. Not simplification. Oh God, I was so glad to hear from the minister that simplification is a mythology. The more you try to simplify, the more you create complexity. The real simplification could be the one I put at number 6, entrusting the EU responsibility for audit and control to a European system of control. It can be done. Don't tell us that it cannot be done, but it's hard. The other 5 things, this shows that the 30 minutes are over. I don't know even how to turn it off. The other 5 things are very clear. You know more than I. I'm not engaged anymore in the details of cohesion policy. You know more than that. So only the title. Connecting a revised European semester to people. The connection that your minister mentioned is fundamental. Cohesion policy must become the way through which national or Euro-wide targets are turned into adapted to places. It is so clear. Cohesion policy offers the way to make sure that the education reform, the labor reform, the health reform actually is adapted to places through the policy done. It's not difficult, but we must be politically believe in it. Stop reducing the role of municipalities. I see dangers of that in the revision of the regulation. Don't take away power from municipalities. They are also a problem, but without them we go nowhere. Stop the tyranny of tenders. We can't just simply, since we don't know where to get the money, we do a tender. And we don't know how to write the tender. And so we give the money in a way which doesn't suit the need which are coming from the bottom. A strong political emphasis on the European Code of Conduct of Partnership. We can't go on talking about partnership all the time, and we don't do it at local level. We don't make sure that the relevant people, we always talk about the representatives, the NGOs. That's not enough. We want the real people coming to the focus groups and discussing. We want the people expressing their needs at local level. This is our job. And finally, and last, to my friends at the European Commission, a big investment in human resources at the European Commission level of the same kind, amazing kind that Jacques Delors did when everything started. We need now to update the skills, we need multidisciplinary skills, because to do partnership properly, to implement outcome indicators, it requires skills that are now available in beautiful universities, and I would like to see 500 young kids to which I teach now in university arriving in Brussels and injecting new life into that institutions, which is fundamental for us.